All right, so as Ryan mentioned, I'm Paige Peterson. I work for the Electric Coin Company. I do a lot of user education and documentation and community outreach for the company. You'll hear later on from Josh Cincinnati from the Zcash Foundation, but the Electric Coin Company, in short, was the organization that bootstrapped Zcash, the Zcash cryptocurrency, and kind of is the primary steward of the currency right now. So if you're not aware, Zcash is a privacy-preserving cryptocurrency. We use zero-knowledge proofs to shield transaction data. If you have any questions about Zcash itself and that essence, feel free to ask afterwards, but this is obviously a roadmap and financial update. So kind of looking back since launch, we launched the cryptocurrency in October 2016. Since then, we've done two major network upgrades, the second one being codenamed Sapling, which introduced significant improvements for the shielded addresses, namely so that they could be less resource intensive for devices that didn't have the resources, so mobile devices and things like that. And that kind of led into a newer project, a newer focus that we started on last year, which was building out a reference light wallets client, and so back-end and front-end reference for third parties to be able to take and use for their implementations. And Brad from the Electric Coin Company is going to be talking about that project specifically tomorrow on the other side of this halls area, so definitely check that out. So we've been working on the reference clients a lot, especially the past 6 months, and looking ahead, we've actually been working on currently a consensus change to help audit the monetary supply. There's a lot of details that go into that right now, but it's basically an enforcement to prevent inflation of the total monetary supply. In short, it's kind of difficult to audit a private cryptocurrency, but there are indirect ways that you can take to prevent that from inflating the whole issuance. And then looking a little bit more forward, we have a network upgrade scheduled for later this year, codenamed Blossom. That's going to include shorter block times, and also is kind of the first step in test driving our network upgrade pipeline. So in earlier this year, we wanted to sort of codify a way and make a process for the community and other organizations to participate in Zcash development. So we implemented and developed this network upgrade pipeline. I should actually say that we're in the process of it right now for the network upgrade following Blossom, not for Blossom itself. So this pipeline is for network upgrade 3, which doesn't have a cool name yet. That's scheduled to be deployed in April of next year. But right now, we're kind of in this state of zip review, so Zcash improvement proposals. People from the company, the foundation, and the general community have proposed improvements for the Zcash protocol. And since the Electric Coin Company are the primary stewards of the protocol, we're going through those and evaluating them to see what is doable for this upcoming upgrade in April. This is kind of an evolving process, so this network upgrade pipeline is kind of the first step to opening up development processes better. We anticipate this to evolve as, for example, the Zcash Foundation gets more involved with protocol development and perhaps other entities as well. But this is really a primary way for the greater community and also the foundation as they ramp up to get involved with specific needs and asks for changes in the protocol. And this map is highly detailed, but it's available online, and you're definitely welcome to check it out and give feedback. You can see that there's areas for, again, the zip reviews, the specification, and implementations and auditing and all of these things. So this process is very as transparent as we can make it. Also, kind of thinking about what we're focusing on in, I guess, the realm of this year. There are a few things that we've more or less think that we're going to attempt to do this year. We plan to release kind of a more formal roadmap in the very near future, but some of the things for 2019 are regulatory feature support. And specifically, one of those features is implementing viewing keys. So viewing keys are essentially being able to provide a third party access to viewing a shielded transaction or transactions related to a shielded address without giving them spending capabilities, also without allowing everyone in the world to see the transaction details. So that's really important for regulatory supports, and that's one of our main focuses previously and going forward. We're one of the first private cryptocurrencies that are listed on regulatory exchanges because we've done a lot of education and outreach to policymakers and regulators. So we're going to continue to do those education efforts and help them understand why privacy is really important for cryptocurrencies as a fundamental concept. And this feature of viewing keys is an important thing to meet those standards. Some other things, just to brush through these, we definitely want to implement scalability. So that starts with research and prototyping, and looking forward, probably more focus on the implementation in a couple of years. Hybrid proof of stake, proof of work research. We teased a little bit of that earlier this year. We didn't really have the time to do the full research on all of that, so we're going to take some time to look into that in a more formal setting and with just more thought-out process. Rollback protection, wallet research and adoption, so that reference wallet team that built out the reference wallet for mobile applications, getting feedback from folks that are using that reference and improving the use cases and things that they see that they need. And then finally, just generally addressing Zcashd user pain points. So Zcash is implemented in a lot of large users, a lot of exchanges and pools that are creating a lot of addresses, and there are potential for improvements for folks that are large user bases like that. So that's kind of the overview of the roadmap. Again, we're gonna be planning on releasing a more formal roadmap in the near future. This is just kind of a sneak preview. So finances. I'll breeze through this quickly because I think I'm cutting into some of Josh's time. So this is an overview of the current funding distribution on a monthly basis until October 2020. So this isn't the total issuance, but this is actually just what's getting distributed to each of these entities every month. So the Electric Coin Company is getting about 2.8%, which is just over 6,000 Zcash per month at this time. And the miners are getting 80%. At 2020, this issuance will end, so that total issuance distribution will be more like the Foundation Electric Coin Company getting about 1.4% in total issuance, and the miners, for example, getting 90% of the total issuance. So contrasting this funding, this monthly funding, to the spending. So we have a bunch of different things that the company's spending money on. The average monthly spend is about twice as much as the monthly income. So we need to we have a runway, but we have a short-term plan while the distribution is still in effect for the Founders Reward, and we're kind of tossing around ideas for long-term funding, which we definitely will be opening up to community feedback and outreach going forward. So this is just a general overview. I don't want to get into the specifics because I think my time's up. So thank you for listening, and now we'll hand it over to Josh from the Zcash Foundation.
Thanks, Paige. Testing. There we go. Howdy. So I'm Josh Cincinnati. I'm the executive director at the Zcash Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit that was actually founded in 2017, dedicated to privacy-preserving spaces in financial infrastructure on the internet, primarily through Zcash. So we started, we really started very, very small and started as a result of the foresight for some of the recipients of the Founders Reward that there needed to be another organization that had similar mission alignment to the Electric Coin Company, but with different incentive models that were more nonprofit in nature and slightly more mission focused. So we started very, very small, but we are now a 5-person team with another person joining next week, and then hopefully more soon after that. We're rapidly assembling an independent tech team that will be working on some of the projects I'm going to describe in a second. Where we really fall, and this is not exhaustive and not complete, but where we fall on the spectrum of the kinds of things that we work on versus the Electric Coin Company is that we are much more focused on community input and community outreach and funding. So one of the things that we've done is we've held 2 grant programs. The chair of those programs is in the crowd somewhere, I think. There we go, Ron Tromer over there. And we have a grant platform that we have built out, and one of the members of the team that has assembled that is also in the crowd. Thanks, Will. That we will be using to scale out even more grant distributions to other members of the community. Things that have been funded through this program. We funded scholarships for students that are studying zero-knowledge systems at a high level. We funded different wallet projects for cross-platform wallet projects, mobile wallets as well. So we've been trying to sort of use the pledged ZEC that we've received to distribute out to the community, to actually engage folks in building ecosystem tooling that can be benefited by everyone in Zcash. The other things that we kind of find ourselves most focused on are experimenting with different kinds of governance structures to collect and solicit community feedback. And we had a governance advisory panel where we presented the results of that at ZCon 0. It actually was fairly influential in determining our board makeup, which is everything in a nonprofit. And the other thing that I'm very, very excited about that we are independently working on, we engaged in a partnership with Parity to build an independent, consensus-compatible Rust node that will be the keystone to all future software that we wind up building. And unlike that network upgrade pipeline that was presented before, once we take over that project, we will have a very, very different, but I suspect somewhat similar in timing, but different development process compared to the Electric Coin Company. But that node will remain consensus compatible with the network. And then the other thing that we do is we host a very large privacy-focused conference once a year called ZCon. Those of you who know your regex know that means hopefully more than one. But the other stuff that we do is sort of a collaboration with the Electric Coin Company, and that is our responsibility, and our shared responsibility has been growing with them. Most recently, with sharing the ZIP process, which is how new features will get added into the protocol now and in the future. So I'm also running out of time, but I will briefly go over this very quickly. So one of the things that I have been really keen on, and I think that the board of the foundation is very keen on, is this idea that governance for Zcash should be a split responsibility, one where there needs to be input and indeed advocacy from both the Electric Coin Company, the Zcash and the Zcash Foundation. And it's easy in a group of people that understand cryptocurrency to express this metaphor as a 2-of-2 multi-sig, where we can't unilaterally choose to go one direction without getting input and advice from the other side. And there are a couple of ways that we do that. On the sort of amicable side of the equation, there's the grant platform, there's the ZIP process and those improvements, and then there's a governance panel, experiments in that future. But there's also this sort of what I like to call plausible threats that encourage consensus. And in that bucket, we have things like the independent node software that we're building, where if we reach a divergence with the Electric Coin Company, there will be a way to enforce our perspective on protocol upgrades compared to the Electric Coin Company. And then there's this future trademark agreement wherein we're going to seek to emulate that 2-of-2 multi-sig in legal defense and ownership of the mark Zcash. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention just a little financial snapshot about where the foundation is today. Our budget is $3.14 million for this year. That was just sort of a coincidence. It didn't mean to be pie. The assets on hand that we have are 94,000 ZEC, around 10 BTC, and $4 million USD. And we have an additional 130,000 ZEC that has been pledged from those original recipients of the Founders Reward. There's a lot more detail on this on a blog post that I made on the Foundation's website that you can see at zfnd.org. And I welcome everyone to check it out and to actually just tweet out to the Foundation or email me if you have any questions. And that's it. So I think we have 10 minutes for questions, right, Ryan? Or moderation?
Yes, indeed.
Great.
All right. So one question that immediately pops to mind, given the relationship between the two entities, you've talked about ongoing funding models. I think the Zcash Foundation, it makes sense if that's ultimately going to be a grant-making body and someone that's funding ongoing development of the protocol and trying to promote the ecosystem. Why is the Electric Coin Company still involved officially in the protocol? How do you think about the time at which ECC will be a service provider or an application builder on top of this technology versus an entity that's still taking on funding, maybe as part of the core rewards that the miners are unleashing with each new block?
So, I mean, that's certainly a possibility. We're exploring different options right now with regards to the long-term fundraising. For the short term, however, we have some kind of plans for maintaining and catching up with the deficit we have. But long term, it's kind of up to the community at that point. We are currently funded by the community. There's other options of getting investments or doing a developer fund of sorts. But I think it's important to have that kind of distinction between organizations, and right now we're kind of the key stakeholders and the key pushers of the protocol, and so we have those core developers that and if they stay with the company, then there's incentive to keep the company around to help maintain.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would add to that is, from my perspective, if the Zcash Foundation were to take over all development, that would be just as bad from an ecosystem development and a protocol development standpoint if any other entity unilaterally controlled the protocol. So I think it's important that when considering these kinds of these future developments and how people decide to organize their development teams and protocol development in general, like it's important not to have a central organizing body that dictates all development, regardless of whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit.
Right, and hopefully there are maybe more for-profit companies that are coming up to help get involved with protocol development as well, and we might just be one of them.
And I guess although the companies and organizations are legally distinct, because you have this scheduled upgrade mechanism via the forks on a regular basis that are telegraphed well in advance, there must be some coordination between the two entities and then the ecosystem of miners. But how do you manage, it seems like most of the developments that get pushed in these upgrades, the community more or less agrees on. How do you anticipate communications between the two highest profile entities evolving to the extent that there are disagreements within the community about paths forward? Zuko in particular is very outspoken even when it's unpopular. It's great in some cases, but there could very well be sticking points further in the future, like perhaps adding inflation bounties on an ongoing basis beyond what was originally laid out in the initial documentation just to fund ongoing operations. That might be unpopular to then switch, here's what we said initially, but we actually think this would be better. I don't anticipate that's going to be unanimously approved, but how do the two entities think about those types of governance decisions?
Yeah, well, from the foundation perspective, I think there's part of why we're developing independent node software is so that users have choice in the direction of the protocol. And my view is, and I think this actually echoes what I've heard from Zuko before and from others at the Electric Coin Company, that like user choice and voluntary exit and action are probably the most powerful governance tools we have at our disposal in cryptocurrencies in general. And being able to provide users with options that are distinct from one organization that might be pushing a particular upgrade path is like really, really important. And when people can vote with their feet that way, that strikes me as a very, very important way to collect that kind of data about decision making.
Yeah, and also I would say maybe in a different opinion than how Josh presented the network upgrade pipeline concept in his half, that maybe that form itself morphs into something that's shared in between the organizations. So that network upgrade pipeline is like the first iteration essentially that we're putting into place because we wanted to get something started. So maybe that communication and working together evolves along with that pipeline as a single process.
I know this is going to be one of the more popular presentations, so as much as I would love to hog the full 10 minutes, we've got about 5 minutes, and if there are any questions from the audience, I'm happy to come around, provided that they're good questions. If you ask a bad question, I'll yank the mic.
I will answer
That's the
bad
only
questions. I love answering bad questions.
Anyone that's non-CoinDesk? I see one back there. I'll get to you in a minute.
So I'm just curious to hear more about kind of what the feedback from the community has been on the, what did you call it, the window into the transactions. Like it just seems like that is, I understand why it's needed regulatorily, but it also feels like a big vulnerability, and I'm just sort of curious what your folks are saying about
Viewing
it.
keys?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
There we go. Yeah, yeah.
People want that feature. That's probably one of the most desired features for any party that's using Zcash. It not only is useful for regulators and providing third parties insight into transaction data, but it's also useful for just general business needs and user needs, and being able to simply view your transactions on one device without having to provide it with the spending capabilities. That's one example.
All right.
You talked more broadly about some of the funding opportunities for the Electric Coin Company. I'd Could you be specific in some of the opportunities that you're looking at for funding going past the block reward that's going from Zcash miners?
Not really, not right now, but we plan on kind of opening up that discussion in like a month or two. I should mention that the transparency stuff I mentioned in these slides are laid out in a full transparency report that we published, I think we published today. So if you go to the Electric Coin Company blog, you'll see our status right now in full detail, and then our kind of temporary solution for until the Founders Reward ends in October 2020. But beyond that, we need community consensus with anything, unless we do just like straight up investor funding. I mean, that's always an option, I guess, but we haven't decided on any one way yet.
Any others? We got 2 minutes left. All right, I'll ask one more. One thing that I think is going to be important for most blockchains is some type of opt-in, opt-out privacy. The way that the Bitcoin community seems to be thinking about implementing privacy is both iterative and then maybe universal, so that they preserve fungibility and there aren't any concerns about coins getting tainted or blacklisted from the network. How have you thought about this issue of fungibility and balancing between giving people the right to be private, but also recognizing the reality that most people are not using shielded transactions? And how have you balanced those regulatory conversations? Because one of the things that the regulators like is the fact that this is privacy cloaking technology, but that anyone that uses it has view keys and can actually do a limited amount of forensics on what's happening on chain. I'm wondering if that breaks down after a certain number of transactions are fully private, or just generally what the dividing line is between too private that the regulators don't get comfy and
Sure.
not private enough where it just kind of goes against the whole project.
So my argument, just to jump in, is that regulators are already comfortable with cash. They're comfortable with cash.
No, they're not.
They
hate cash because it's not part of the surveillance state.
But it exists, and people still use it, and people are still going to use it. And I think people would be up in arms if cash, as it exists today, was completely eliminated. And when a bank gets a cash deposit from an ATM, they have limited ability to conduct that kind of forensics. But when you send money from your bank to something suspicious, they obviously still have that power to engage in that sort of oversight. And that's not at all, in my view, distinct from digital cash, where you have no idea maybe what the history of the prior coins that you receive are. But as soon as you send Zcash to Gemini or somewhere else where they have custody of your funds, and you wind up they have bilateral access to all of your information that way, regulators are comfortable with that, and I think they will continue to be.
And just to follow up on that, it's actually also interesting to think about different jurisdictions. So if Gemini in the U.S. is regulated and the U.S. are able to have viewing capabilities to those transactions, but the Chinese government can't have access because it's not a public blockchain, that's an actual benefit. You're protecting the people within your jurisdiction.